The invoice came to $7,400. The part on it cost $410. A wheat farmer outside Great Bend in Barton County, Kansas, read it twice, standing in the gravel between his shop and a John Deere combine that had sat dead for 9 days in the middle of wheat harvest. He folded the paper once, laid it on the workbench, and looked at the green paint for a long time. His grandfather bought this family's first John Deere. His father was buried in a cap with the leaping deer on it. He had never written a check to any other color of machine in his life. And standing there, a thought arrived that had never once been allowed on that farm. What am I actually paying for? By October, a red case IH tractor was parked where a green one used to sit. But the bill did not break him. The bill was only the receipt for something that had been breaking for 11 years. What that something was, and which John Deere decision manufactured it on purpose, one boardroom vote at a time, is the story. Every acre, every dollar figure, and every date in his story comes from documented cases across the American wheat belt. The pattern is real. His grandfather bought the family's first new John Deere in 1966, a 4020, about 95 horsepower, for just under $9,000 in the money of that time. Nearly 2 years of an average Kansas paycheck, financed through a dealership 11 miles up the road, whose owner sat 3 pews back at the same church. That dealership was the actual product. When the baler quit on a Saturday, the parts counter opened on Sunday. When the 4020 lost its injector pump during harvest, a mechanic drove out that evening and worked under a trouble light until it fired. Deere was not selling that family a tractor. It was selling the certainty that a neighbor had staked his own name on keeping the tractor running. So the loyalty compounded like interest. The 4020 stayed, joined by a 4040 in 1978, then the big 4-wheel drives, then a combine. There is a photograph in the farmhouse hallway of 3 generations on one hay rack, and every machine behind them in the frame is green. By 2010, the farm held close to $1 million of green equipment, and the brand had stopped being a preference. It was the 3rd name on the mailbox. But between his grandfather's dealer and his own, the promise and the company that made it were quietly becoming 2 different things. So what does it take to end a loyalty like that? Not one invoice. 11 years of smaller cuts that one invoice finally added up. The first cut came in 2019, when the dealership 11 miles away was bought by a chain operating dozens of stores across 3 states. The sign stayed green. The parts man who knew his equipment by memory took a package and left. Service now ran through a regional call center, and the nearest full shop sat 52 miles away. Remember that number? It comes back. But distance was only the visible cut. The labor rate climbed next, past $180 an hour, roughly double what the old owner had charged a decade earlier. So a hydraulic leak that once cost a Saturday and a case of beer now cost 4 figures, and a 2-week wait behind every other farm in the region, because one consolidated shop was serving territory that 4 independent shops used to cover. Did he leave then? He did not. Loyalty, that old, does not snap at inconvenience. It snapped in June of 2025, when a sensor in the combine's diesel exhaust fluid system misread. That system is emissions equipment, and when its computer sees a fault, it cuts the engine down to a crawl and will not restore full power until a dealer-connected tool clears the code. Even after the farmer had replaced the failed sensor himself with his own hands. So a running, repaired combine sat parked for 9 days in a 2-week harvest window, waiting 52 miles for a technician, while ripe wheat stood in the field losing value to every passing storm. The final invoice stacked a diagnostic fee, mileage billed both directions, 9 hours of labor, and a $410 part into $7,400. It was never that one bill. It was the pattern the bill confirmed, itemized in black and white. But this was one farm and one invoice. So why was the same scene repeating in nearly every county in Kansas at the same time? If that question is worth an answer to you, subscribe. This channel works through one machine class, one corporate decision, one customer at a time, and the list is long. The answer starts with what happened to the dealers. In the middle 1990s, John Deere farm equipment was sold through more than 3,000 North American stores owned by well over 1,000 separate local families. By the early 2020s, the store count had fallen by roughly half, and the majority of what remained was controlled by fewer than 100 ownership groups, some running 50 stores or more. That was not an accident of the market. Deere encouraged it openly because a machine full of computers needs expensive technicians and expensive tools, and only large dealer groups can carry that overhead. But why would fewer, bigger dealers make a repair bill grow? Because of a number the equipment world calls absorption. Absorption measures whether a dealership's parts and service income covers the entire cost of keeping its doors open, so that every machine sold lands as nearly pure profit. A dealer principal chasing absorption is paid, in effect, to make the service department carry the building. Every labor rate increase, every mileage charge, every locked diagnostic fee moves that number the right direction. And a farmer with no second Deere store within reach has nowhere to price shop. So did someone at Deere headquarters in Moline sign off on that $7,400 bill? No one did. Nobody in that building drew up a plan to strand a man at harvest. Somebody approved a plan to raise absorption, and the stranded man came out the other end of it. The dealer stopped competing the day it consolidated. So in October of 2025, the farmer drove 12 miles the other direction, to a Case IH store that was still owned by the same family that opened it in 1958. The owner walked the lot with him personally. What did that dealer offer that the green one would not? A printed service rate sheet? A guarantee in writing that a harvest breakdown gets a technician on site within 24 hours, and the owner's personal cell number written on the back of the quote. The trade cost him. The chain store's offer on his green tractor came in low, and taking red paint onto that farm cost something no invoice can itemize. He told his 81-year-old mother before he signed. The words that follow are reconstructed from a dozen documented versions of the same conversation across the wheat belt. I did not leave John Deere. The people I bought from left first. She looked out the kitchen window at the shed for a while and said nothing at all. The day the Case IH arrived, he backed it into the spot where the big green four-wheel drive had sat for 19 years. Then he walked to the far end of the shed, pulled the tarp off his grandfather's 40-20, and ran his thumb across the hood before covering it again. He is one man. But the numbers say he has company. Deere's large agriculture division watched sales fall by roughly a third in its 2024 fiscal year, then fall further the year after. And while cheap grain explains part of that, it does not explain the courtroom traffic. In 2022, farmers filed a federal class action over locked repairs. In 2023, Colorado wrote the first state law forcing equipment makers to hand over repair tools. In January of 2025, federal regulators sued Deere directly. Those cases center on repair software, and that story has carried its own video on this channel. The quieter force underneath them is the one this farmer met at the parts counter. A dealer network with no local competition left inside it. A machine is a purchase. A farm makes perhaps once a decade, A service monopoly bills every single year in between, and it bills hardest in the exact weeks the customer cannot say no. Why does any of this reach you if you will never drive a combine? Because absorption math is not a farm idea. The chain that services your car, the company behind your furnace, and the maker of your washing machine are all being graded on the same number, and every one of them has noticed that the repair is more profitable than the sale. None of that required you to know a camshaft from a crankshaft. Here is where this story should end the way the Caterpillar story ended, with the customer gone and the brand locked out of the farm. And it does not quite. The defectors are not selling their old green machines, they keep them. Because 40-year-old Deere iron predates the locked computers and runs forever. What Deere is losing is not its installed base. It is the next order, which is worse, because the installed base ages while the next order compounds somewhere else. None of this makes red paint better than green. Case IH caught this man because of a structural accident that is starting to look like a strategy. Consolidation moved slower and unevenly through its network. So in hundreds of rural counties, the Case IH store is now the last equipment dealer, where the owner's name is on the building and the owner's money is on the line with every angry customer. That dealer prices service to keep a family for 30 years, not to carry a chain's overhead for a quarter. And Case IH Corporate has learned to aim at the wound, arming those dealers with trade packages built specifically for Deere households, making their first switch in 3 generations. The window opened because the incumbent turned its service counter into a profit center. The winner simply kept its counter a promise. The green machines already on that Kansas farm will keep running for decades, and no settlement, no lawsuit, and no red tractor changes that. But the next combine, the 6-figure order that used to be automatic, has already been decided, and it will not be green. You can inherit a tractor. You cannot inherit a reason to buy the next one. One loop stays open. The same consolidation math that hollowed out Deere's dealer counters is already running inside the red network too, one buyout at a time. Whether the refuge repeats the sin is the next story. If you want to watch that domino before it falls, subscribe.